Hi everybody, and we've got Mark and James.
Hello Kevin.
Hi guys.
Hello Mark.
Been an interesting year in rugby.
It certainly has. It certainly has.
Let's chat about something that I'm happy about from a Springbok point of view, the appointment of Foster. I mean, to me, it's shocking that Robinson got overlooked, or didn't even get a look in. To say he was overlooked, I mean, it was a fair statement. He didn't even feature, I don't believe.
Well, they had the two interview processes. He was in there for 2.5 hours,
Yeah.
and Foster was in there for 2.5 hours. And they say the best man got the job, and there was a thorough process. A lot of people have mocked the process. This talk of 26 people being approached. Most of the leading coaches pulled out: Jamie Joseph, Tony Brown, Dave Rennie, Vern Cotter. They said they didn't believe that there was a process, that it was fait accompli. The succession planning was always that Foster would take over, because the belief was always that they'd win the World Cup. Yeah. And what has surprised many is that Foster's attack guru approach was impotent against England in that semi-final. And he has said he was only an assistant. He's now the head coach. He's got to reinvent himself. He's kind of got to show that he's his own man. But there's this belief in New Zealand that it was an old boys club. The decision was made before that. Robinson said he threw everything at it. He's kind of...
Including three Crusader Super Rugby titles.
Yeah, I mean, he said he sent Foster a message to say congratulations, and but express his own disappointment. And so he said he went in there believing he was the best candidate, that his track record spoke for itself. 5 titles out of potential 6, plus the under-20 title, and that age shouldn't have counted against him. And he felt that he showed them enough that he could add another dimension to the All Blacks, and that he's committed to New Zealand rugby for now, because the first series of stories that came out is he can name his price in European club rugby as a coach, and even with other international teams as well. Yeah. And is it going to be a case of he coaches against the All Blacks before he ever coaches for the All Blacks? But we touched on this last week. New Zealand, who have set the standards, and they've kind of been 2 steps ahead of the rest of the world in terms of innovation for the last decade, have seemed to have kind of regressed back to this old boys club, this conservatism, and everyone's saying he's too young at 45. Rassie wasn't too young. He's not too young. This guy just kind of, he churns out silverware, and Ian Foster in 10 years had a 53% success rate and never won a title with the Chiefs. On what basis did he get the job? Is it from within?
Of course, I would think that that's the problem. That's always been one of the things leveled at the rugby hierarchy, is that it is an old boys club. And at 45, I mean, you're not too young. And there's many people that prove that. And to me, I've looked at Scott Robinson. I sort of, if you want to look at a comparative personality in another sport, he's kind of like the Jurgen Klopp of rugby for me. He communicates well with the older players, the younger players, and he won a hell of a rugby brain. I think, wasn't it, Ronan O'Gara was tutoring under him, and said he learnt more in 2 months under Scott Robinson than he'd learnt in his entire life under other coaches.
Yeah, what is heartwarming for me is that the All Blacks are almost in a scenario where we were over the last decade. Yeah. In doubt. They're riddled with doubt now. If you've got Foster, who came in and professed he was only an assistant coach, but he was the attacking guru for the All Blacks, now saying he's got to reinvent himself. What does that say about his commitment to the All Black cause in trying to win a third World Cup back-to-back? It creates enormous doubts. And for me and for World Rugby, I think this should be comforting that they're finding themselves in doubt, and probably going to be facing a very problematic international future if everybody's doubting in the selection of the coach.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great point, James, because if you're making excuses before you've even taken over the helm, it doesn't bode well for because you show me a CEO that's in a company that's good at excuses, 100%. And I'll show you a bad company.
Quite right. And if the All Blacks, based on their legacy, I mean, they never doubted the selection of their coaches in decades. Now they're doubting, and also remember, players pick up on this kind of stuff. I was a player once, and when you don't really believe in the coach, it's like water for duck's back when he communicates a message to you, because you don't really believe.
Well,
he
I guess the
doesn't-
question that I'm thinking is there an anti-Scott Robinson campaign, or is there an anti-Crusaders campaign? Because the Crusaders have had such a high representative number of players from their team representing the All Blacks. I mean,
Well, the big sports awards in New Zealand across all sports is the Halberg Awards, and there were 10 nominations for Coach of the
I stayed
Year,
up to watch that.
and 10 for Team of the Year, and 17 for Coach of the Year. And Steve Hanson's been nominated for Coach of the Year, and Scott Robertson hasn't, in 17 coaches. And the Crusaders haven't been nominated as Team of the Year, yet they've won 3 successive Super Rugby titles.
Yeah.
So you just got to ask yourself, how do they not factor into being in the top
Well,
two in terms of sporting
it is
achievements?
concerning. I mean, if where your basis and your strength over so many years has come from out of the Crusaders, how do you discard them or don't take them into account? As I say, I think there is a major turmoil at the moment within New Zealand rugby, and only time will tell for them, I think.
Look, I think their big escape clause in their mind is going to be Gatland. He's without a doubt in the top 3 of world rugby when it comes to coaches, his experience. They knew he wasn't a consideration because of the Lions tour that he had committed to. They've only given Foster a 2-year contract, which is also quite significant. So do they then hedge their bets and say in 2 years' time, Robinson will have had another 2 more years, potentially another title or 2, and Gatland is available, so they're 2 years out from the World Cup. They can kind of salvage this decision. But if Robinson comes in and is fairly successful, where does Gatland then fit into the mix?
Yeah.
So I don't know if this one has been couched with the potential of a Gatland to come back. But I just,
it's not a strong appointment.
It's not a strong
No,
appointment
it's
at all.
not at all. It's not
couched
based on the duration.
No, and you look at, I go back to when Alistair was coaching the Springboks, and you had a Johan Ackerman was overseas. You had a Rassie who was overseas at that time. You had some very good coaches that weren't in this country anymore. They were overseas. And then you always looked in the New Zealand system and you felt they've got brilliant coaches overseas, but they've also got brilliant coaches in New Zealand. And they go and do the apprenticeship there. But now Foster wouldn't be appointed by any international side. And he wouldn't get a head coaching job in Europe. But he's now going to be the All Black coach. And the barometer for me has always been, do you coach England, South Africa, or New Zealand in World Rugby? Those are probably the top 3 jobs.
Isn't it great, though, that we're talking about this for the All Blacks and not another, a year that the Boks have won the World Cup. We did say that New Zealand weren't going to win the World Cup for reasons similar to these, in terms of they were regressing and going backwards. And they've taken another giant leap backwards.
Yeah,
Well,
and
yes, what for me is nice that normally we'd be talking about the concerns in Springbok Rugby.
Yeah.
This would be a year ago, 18 months ago, we would be talking about, where's the future for South African rugby and how we're going to turn it around.
Yeah.
So it's nice now to be talking about somebody else, and even more specifically, a team like the All Blacks.
Well, I think also if you look at just the reaction in Australia, Dave Rennie's appointment, who he's brought in already as assistant, the Australian skills coach that was with England. You look at Eddie Jones, he wants Matthew Proudfoot, turns up as his scrum coach. So there's movement, but everyone's talking about how it's improving these sides and the potential to improve them, and how strong South Africa is going to be, especially with the
Is Proudfoot the best scrummaging coach that Eddie Jones could get?
Well, I think after that final, he must have looked at his team going back every scrum and thought, I want the guy who's the scrum coach of the Boks. I know Rassie always wanted Peter de Villiers, but because of family issues with his wife's father got ill, and that's why he went back to Paris and he helped out Hanneke Meyer, which turned into a disaster with Stade Francais. Stade Francais. And Proudfoot, there was under Alistair, there was an is he good, isn't he that good? But kudos to the guy. Our scrum was the most potent at the World Cup.
Yeah,
and
look,
they destroyed England, So he's got a good gig going to England. It opens up something new
The
here.
thing that he doesn't have that South Africa had is
the players.
Is the depth. And
Yeah.
the players.
He doesn't have the bomb squad.
No, and that's going to be that to me is going to be.
But guys, isn't it always that a coach has to have a set of skills. He has to be able to, at that level, manage players and bring them together, identify a good game plan. All those structures need to be in place. But ultimately, you need players You need the right caliber of players.
Yeah.
Which we know in terms of Matthew, not to take anything away from him. I mean, at one stage they didn't even want him part of the setup. Yes, kudos to him because he did perform, but he performed with 2 packs of fours that at any given stage could have represented South Africa.
Or could have represented almost any other team in the world.
Correct.
I mean,
absolutely.
and to me, that's not down to Proudfoot. To me, that's down to Rassie's talent identification.
Yeah.
Not to take away
But
from
now
him,
also Matthew going to England, it's quite interesting what secrets he will share there now with Eddie Jones.
Yeah.
In terms of the entire Rassie methodology and way of thinking and planning and process.
Well, I think that that's not that much of a guarded secret. Rassie's pretty much hard on sleeve sort of guy. But you're right. I mean,
some inside info.
Look, from an international perspective, I think it's been an amazing year of rugby because it's just kind of restored the equilibrium to how the game should be. There's 5 or 6 teams that are competitive. France showed glimpses of that World Cup of coming back. Fabien Galtie's is going to be the coach. He's got some external influence. Flock Cilliers, the former Province and Bulls Fluff, he's going as their kicking consultant over there as well. So Eddie Jones has identified them as being the dark horse for the Six Nations. Pivac started well with Wales. He wants to add some new things.
He knows he's not going to have a lot of Saracens players playing in the Six Nations.
Well, they'll be fighting to get back those 35 points.
Yeah.
But I think it's wonderful for the game when we look to the international season that you've got the top 6 on par. What's interesting for me is I've seen the South African players go back into their domestic and European championship games, and they've been outstanding, those World Cup players. From Cheslin Colby to Jan Reinach, they've really played well. Evans made his debut for Toulon, tweeted to Brian Abana and John Smith and to Bakkies, I can see what you guys told me about playing in this city and playing for this team, how amazing the experience is going to be. So they've already got that momentum, but a lot of that World Cup euphoria can quickly be undone if we don't produce in Super Rugby. And we are overdue a Super Rugby title.
Yeah, James, you sorry, Mark, you played in the '95 World Cup team, and I think that was a different era because you're right on the cusp of amateur going into professional, winning a World Cup, the euphoria of Mandela. So it was a different time and place, and a different kind of euphoria. But what was the challenges for the people that represented the Boks coming out of that World Cup and sustaining expectations?
Yeah, Kevin, we spoke about this the other night, actually, Mark and myself, is that, we went from earning 7,500 Rand as a Springbok to winning the World Cup and signing those Sanzar contracts, which, we then earned, Category A Bok earned 120,000 Rand a month. Yeah. So we were still incredibly immature in terms of professionalism. And after we earned that kind of money, we fragmented, we fell apart, we all ran into different directions. Yeah. We were buying businesses and motor cars and watches and bikes and all sorts of stuff.
And that's when the Rand was 4 to the dollar.
Yeah, there we go. So, but now the players are professional. They understand what it is like earning the big bucks. Yeah. I have to add on to what Mark's saying is that, you've got to watch. It's like matriculating and saying, listen, I'm going to take a sabbatical and go overseas for 1 or 2 years before I study again. All of a sudden, you never come back to your studies. Yeah. The best thing that could have happened for the overseas players and overseas contingent of the representation in the box side is going straight back into rugby.
Yeah. And, and it's amazing the reputation that South African players have in Europe. Yeah. They play a lot of games.
Because they keep performing there.
Yeah.
The problem is, you have a look at our local players, as Mark said now, Zalt made a comment or an innuendo that, he hopes that the 7 Boks playing for the Stormers can play at the same level they played for South Africa.
Well,
now that's quite interesting.
Zalt should go out and get another 8 or 15 Bok players to surround him.
Or he should just let the Stormers play in green and gold.
There we go.
I think that's a pretty naive statement, James. By him.
No, absolutely. But it's nice to have a dig. It's nice to let them know, what? Each one of those 7 individuals set a very high individual performance for themselves in the green and gold jersey. So they need to carry that over into the super setup.
My question to Zalt Murray would be, why wasn't these conditions given to Robbie Fleck, who clearly had bigger budgets, who had more than 7 Springboks in a side in most years that I watched them, and they were one of the most unwatchable teams in Super Rugby. So now Dobbo's got, you know, and I like Dobson. I think he's a Western Province through and through, or Stormers through and through. And why is he being measured against something that no other man was measured against?
Well, I think it's maybe simply because of us winning the World Cup, and there's so much expectation now put on a player that has represented South Africa. So I don't think it's unfair. And also, you know, I think maybe for Robbie, maybe there just wasn't enough respect that the players gave him, and vice versa. I don't know if maybe his structures weren't right. He was a very likable guy, but he wasn't able to bring the best out in his players, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So only time will tell now with Dobbo. And I promise you, a lot has to do with the coach.
Yeah, of course.
You know, if you have that synergy and that belief in a coach, where if he tells you run through the wall, you run through the wall. If he tells you we're going to play like this or like that, then, you know, that is how it will be on the day.
Well, I've no doubt that you probably played for guys that knew less than you did about rugby, and that's never inspiring.
No, not at all.
And
But if we're talking about coaching, if you look at the South African Super Rugby coaches for next year, they're all in their first season of Super Rugby.
Yeah.
It's a very young coaching structure. I think Dobbo's probably got the most experience of how he's come through the ranks. Yes. With the Province Juniors, with the Vodacom Cup side, the Currie Cup side, and he was part of that Stormers structure in the last 2 years as a breakdown specialist, and then obviously as one of the assistants. But that's also going to be challenging in its own, because you've got some of these World Cup winning Springboks who have gone up in terms of their own estimation of their own worth with some very young coaches. And how do they kind of show who is the boss when it comes to Super Rugby? I think it's going to be a very challenging first 3 months to see how these guys respond. And I hope to goodness that there is a maturity and there is that consistency, because it's driven by Rassie as the director of rugby, and then his communication with the regional coaches to say, if you don't perform in Super Rugby, and you're not playing in the Test series. Because he spoke, I think the biggest thing he's spoken about post the World Cup is it's one thing to win a World Cup. You don't want to be losing for the next 3 years. They have to get consistency in their game to be taken seriously. And to go to France in 2023 as a formed team, a team that can win and back up victories, be it in Super Rugby or be it in Test Rugby. And great euphoria, wonderful 2019 for us. But 2020 can't be a hangover year.
no, but I'm still enjoying the hangover of 2019, and we've still got I think a few days left in the new year to enjoy it, or before the new year. And you know, we've talked about it before, to enjoy and celebrate that stuff. And it's going to be an interesting and bizarre world of rugby next year. You've got the Saracens being docked those points, so Eddie's English options are going to be limited. You've got the Boks playing Georgia and Scotland twice. You've got an all-black coach that no one that I know of really rates him, other than the old boys that selected him. You've got an island probably on the down with Schmidt not coaching anymore, and players getting a little old. And Ireland don't have the depth and conveyor belt of a South Africa. You've got a Wales that's going through, that has a new coach. You know, you've got Australia that's still got Raylene Castle. You know, the probably the most incompetent person in rugby, and the one that courted the most disastrous press last year. So Australian rugby hasn't improved. I don't know if it can get any worse, but it hasn't improved. So it's going to be it's a great year.
So any improvement will be good.
So yeah, so I don't think the Boks are going to have to take too many Alka-Seltzers to get over any hangover. The guy I'm worried about is Sia, though. You know, he's been on the and fair play to him in terms of the signing with Jay-Z and all that stuff. But you know, I'm not sure if he's keeping his feet on the ground.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of demand for him, and I see he's all over the world at the moment, and there's just so much expectation of him to be at certain events, and he's seen as this inspirational figure, and you know, he's saying all the right things. He's nominated as one of the BBC sports personalities. Yeah, he said, it's not me, it's the team. Without them, I wouldn't be here. Yeah. And it is one thing to say those things, but he really needs to get back on a field. And he needs to be leading that Stormers in 2020 and kind of showing his worth to the game here. Because the greatest inspiration he will be is he can back up that World Cup. And those who advise him on that, I would hope that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, there is a pulling back on kind of his public persona, and he gets stuck in, does the hard yards again, and kind of replicates what he did for that World Cup squad for the Stormers.
Yeah, well, I think it's still early days, you know. I mean, we are, in all fairness, only in December. So, you know, he's got to go and represent South Africa.
Yeah, and that's a demanding
Yeah.
schedule.
And I think right now what he's doing, in my opinion, is good for the game, good for the country. Yes, obviously good for him.
Yeah.
But as Mark said, you know, all that is going to come down to eventually, he's going to be judged on what he does on a rugby field.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a fine line of juggling for him.
Yeah.
You know, either the moment he's going to get too big and he will implode,
Yeah.
or he's going to be able to balance that. And we all know, guys, it's like if you drink a bottle of whiskey every night, you're going to land up having a liver failure or with issues. It's like running across the road and not looking. A car is going to ride over you. It's going to be the same instances, you know.
Yeah, and
applications.
don't get me wrong. I mean, Jay-Z and Beyonce are mega brands, and it's great to be aligned with them. It's just that.
But he's a brand, a rugby brand, and he's a rugby player.
Yeah.
So, you know, all those sideshows put aside, if he implodes, it could have a catastrophic effect on saying, right, coming from where he came from to where he is and where eventually maybe lands up.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want that reversal story.
No, because the one thing that I enjoyed immensely this year was a team at the World Cup that was more representative of society, a team that through Sia and the dancing and the singing was more representative of this country. I mean, it was a euphoric time, you know, and I'm not quite sure that those people understand the magnitude of what his role is in this country.
And you keep on talking about it was a team effort, and no player was bigger than the other one at that World Cup. You could see that in terms of selections, in terms of game plan strategy, and in the way they spoke about each other. But the way society and the media kind of portray it, they look to the leader,
Yeah.
and Sia was the captain. And just in the last 2 to 3 weeks, you get the sense that world media sees it as the Sia show, not as the Springbok show.
Yeah.
And that to me is unfair on him, because I don't say he's seen it like that.
No.
But how does that then play out in the new year? And
No,
you know,
but when you've got people in your life that are constantly telling you that it was the Sia show, not that they are, I don't know, but I mean, when it's hard to it's
Hard to start eventually believing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're now Jay-Z's cousin, and you know you're going to Beyonce's for dinner or whatever, you know, that's quite a. It's hard not to believe what you're being.
And
told.
also, you've got to remember how Sia integrates back into the Stormers setup is how the players are going to regard him.
Of course.
You've got to remember that, and that's key critical. Yeah, if he can have those two personalities or the two different Sias, the one that's in the Jay-Z camp and the one standing on stages accepting awards and making speeches, that's different. The other thing is coming back to the rugby field and being able to engage on the old Sia, if that's the one for expression, amongst his teammates.
Yeah, and it takes a level of maturity to embrace that back into the camp, and because there is more good coming out of it than bad, but if it's not managed properly.
Well, I think we've seen as South Africa, and I say this with utmost respect, and still being a little small-minded with people's success, is you don't want jealousy that also becomes an underline and an evil.
Look, I'm horribly
amongst-
jealous.
Yeah. It just sounds so nice.
Who wouldn't want to have dinner with Beyonce?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair comment.
So let's chat about who was your player of the Rugby World Cup for South Africa?
look, I don't begrudge Peter Steff, World Player of the Year, Stormers player, South African player, but for me, the guy who lit up this year was Cheslin Kolbe. And I think more so because he played no differently to lose, and when he finally got the chance for the Springboks, that he played for nearly a decade for the Stormers in Western Province. And all you kept on hearing was, and Nick Mallard was at the forefront of that, put him down at scrum off. He's not big enough for a win. He can never play in the back three.
Well, it's not like Nick to be wrong, is it?
No, not at all. And he went to Europe, and he was, in his first year at Toulouse 2 years ago, he was named as the best foreign import among so many other players that came in, and players who had played 100 tests and 80 tests for their respective countries. and he was playing against 120 kilogram winners and embarrassing them with his footwork.
Yeah.
And when he got the chance for South Africa, he just blossomed and he dazzled, and he kind of gave us an X factor that other teams just didn't have.
Yeah.
He could
was
break
like,
up.
He was like a pinball, wasn't he?
Yeah, and if I look at that 16 all,
Yeah.
you know, that 16 all draw against New Zealand, Wellington, which in hindsight was a magnificent result, but we were comfortably beaten in that second half at 16-9, and he conjured up something from nowhere.
Yeah.
We got the bounce through Herschel Yankees, scored, and Pollard kicked the conversion. Then the try that he didn't score, but would have been one of the greatest individual tries ever, with credit to Mahanga for making that tackle, where he ripped that All Black defense apart. The way he scored in the final, just the buzz that he brought to that Springboks. And I think it was, the relevance for me was, there's a whole generation of Colbys in South Africa who hopefully will never be prejudiced again, because they're not 6'5" and they don't weigh 120 kilograms. That a great footballer with skill set is an asset and something to be cherished. So to me, he really was the player of the year. And when he went back to Europe, he won the International Player of the Year, he won the Toulouse Player of the Year, he won the Top 14 Player of the Year. Yeah. He got all the accolades there. And I think back of a guy like Keohane, who was in the same class as Cheslin Kolbe and just never got those opportunities, and went on to play into his early 30s in Europe, and he's still playing in Japan. I just think it was, you know, if the World Cup team broke the shackles of transformation in terms of the negativity around it, Cheslin Kolbe won a big fight for the small men of world rugby.
Shackles of a small man.
Yeah, and you know, the thing that I'll ask you now, James, but to me, the thing that should be laid to rest now is this troll mentality of people saying, you know, look, we're never going to win a World Cup again because of this, because of that, because of transformation. It's like, you know, well done to Rassie and his team for putting those ghosts to bed.
Well, if we won the first one with effectively 4 million to choose from, and now you've got 60 million to choose from, we should never lose it again.
No. I mean, I know of no other team that'll do a 1 month tour around the country, almost hitting every...
That could still be touring now. There'd be people coming out to see that.
So. James, who's your player of the year?
No, look, I mean, only a fool would nominate anyone else, and based on the mitigating factors Mark's put before us now, you'd have to go with Cheslin. You know, and I take myself as an example. I was a very small hooker, and even, you know, people would say that you'd never make it, you're too small, you know, why don't you rather give it up as a bad habit? And you know, in terms of the transformation thing, those shackles being cut off, in terms of a small player against his peers, I think those shackles have been cut off. And it's all about having that X factor. Every team needs that X factor. Yeah. We've seen that over years of success of rugby teams. You have to have that one player in his own individual brilliance that can turn a game on his head, and he certainly is that. And you know, in terms of receiving so many international awards, that speaks for itself. Yeah. You know, and then I mean, you know, obviously a guy like Peter Steff, who for me has been a consistently good performer, game in and game out. But yeah, Cheslin would certainly be my choice along with Mark. Yeah. And if we may ask you, who's your player of the year?
Willie LaRue. Just kidding. You know, it's hard to argue against Cheslin, but I would put another big shout out there to Damian Allende in terms of the way that he played throughout the World Cup. I thought he was immense.
Yeah, he was immense. He certainly came into his own and showed the ability that lies within him.
Yeah, especially at the position he plays is so vital. And he, as a friend of mine once explained to me, that he naturally squares himself to attack and defend, which is a rarity amongst centres. Yeah. So yeah, I think he was immense, but I'm not going to take it away from Cheslin. He is a real pocket rocket, you know, just a superb player.
It's nice to see we've got consensus for each other.
Well, it's taken us a year to get there.
Yeah. Although we had consensus that New Zealand wouldn't win the World Cup.
We did indeed.
And then we didn't have consensus who was going to win the boxing match.
Okay,
but I won't mention that.
No. Don't, well, you just did. So let's.
What boxing match? Because apparently that's what Ruud said. What boxing match?
Okay, give me one prediction that's out there for next year, like a surprising prediction.
Wow, surprising prediction.
Seize the day.
Yeah.
Stormers to make the playoffs.
Good. James?
Geez, Kevin, you've caught me off guard. Prediction, Tiger Woods to win another major.
Ah, okay. Mine is for New Zealand coach to be fired. Well, no, we don't want him.
No, I don't want him fired. He's going to stick around for a couple of years.
But no, yeah, that's my prediction. Anyway, guys, thanks. It's been a great year with you guys, and look forward to more next year.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Mark, and to all our viewers and to my friends. Have a blessed Christmas and a prosperous 2020.
Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho.
And a bottle of rum.